All right, welcome to the Reluctant Historian podcast. This is the podcast that I'm making my students do. It's for History 495 this semester. We're going to be going through their research process on how they come up with their paper topics and what they are doing to make sure they don't fail my class. Hopefully you will enjoy these episodes.
Welcome back to the Reluctant Historians podcast at PNW. My name is Kayla Garza, and I'm going to be hosting today's episode. First, we have
Annika Grienke.
All right, Annika, can you tell me really quick, remind me what your paper topic is?
Yeah, so I'm researching Victorian grave robbing, kind of like the before, the middle, and after, and like what communities were affected, like the different events. I haven't really nailed down a thesis, honestly, because I'm still really getting into like finding new and more interesting stuff every time I like really delve into the research. So I haven't found like the overarching like thesis I want to nail in yet, but I'm really kind of getting there as I comb through it.
All right, that sounds like a really interesting topic. What have you seen so far that has made you realize that this can be a topic that you can actually write a paper about instead of just seeming interested in it?
Yeah, so people have heard of like in passing like Victorian grave robbing and like kind of some of the more urban legends that come from it, and that's kind of the knowledge honestly that I had going into it. But as I've researched, I've found that there's so much more to set up what happened for like instead of most people hear like the perspective of schools needed bodies for like anatomy lessons, or people were trying to steal jewelry off of bodies. But there's really so much more into it. There is like the classic like grave robbing we think of, but then there's also like the exploitation of the peasant and pauper communities with the passing of legal bills that would immediately like donate your own body to medical schools, and your things would be forfeited, and like how that kind of stuff affected the community. There is murders, the famous murders Burke and Hare, who murdered 16 people in order to sell their bodies to anatomy schools. So like it kind of starts as like this one little like kernel, I guess, of knowledge, and then you could kind of see how much is developing behind the scenes, or how much there was that you don't really get to hear about unless you really like deep dive into it.
Yeah, I just wondering where is this coming from? Are you researching this taking place in a specific country?
Yeah, this is Victorian England is mostly what I'm looking at. There's body snatching that occurs everywhere. Like there's also stuff in like New York, Virginia, in India, China, places like that. But I'm mostly focusing on Victorian England.
All right, nice. Because I feel like I remember, we have to keep our topics outside of American history, but I was just wondering, because I've heard a lot about that from a lot of different places in the world. That's cool. So when you started looking for primary sources for your overall research, where did you start? Like, where do you start looking? Like, this is where I'm going to start finding primary sources.
So honestly, for me, I love JSTOR. That's the one I use the most often. I would go through, I'd find some secondary sources first that really interested me, because, I feel like the secondary sources kind of give you like an outside perspective and kind of give you stories and context that people who were actually writing at the time didn't really have like as much of like third view perspective. So I kind of start reading that, and I'd find stuff that was interesting, or I'd find quotes from people, and I would note down, okay, this person's important, this event is important, and then from there I would look up this person and I would find their writings, or I would look up this law and find the actual law, and things like that. So kind of like making a list of important events, important people, and then going really like specifically into that person and what they might have contributed.
Okay. And have you ever found any like sources that kind of go against what the other sources say, or things like that, kind of almost contradicting? Have you ever found those, or no, not really?
Not quite. The most I found really is people acknowledging that like the whole like facet of what I was talking about is really underrepresented by people mostly just focus on like the urban legends and the murders and like the big picture stuff, but there's a lot more underlying issues. That's really more what I saw as people talking about we need to more fully explore some of the smaller things, like the cholera riots that like fed into this bigger idea. But I haven't read any like counterfactual stuff for this yet.
So it's kind of, all of these sources are kind of telling or warning to study the societal or the
cultural impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And If you could tell yourself something back at the beginning of the semester before starting this, what is one thing you kind of would warn yourself or give advice to yourself about?
So, I mean, me personally, I'm kind of a procrastinator. I would definitely tell myself, don't procrastinate on the research. Because, I mean, you know, obviously the goal is to have a set amount of pages down or like a schedule that you know that you'll follow. I'm not the best at that. So just telling myself, hey, don't leave the research to the last minute, because if you have this like wealth of knowledge, it's a lot easier to write the paper with your notes, with what you know. So if you're going to procrastinate, don't procrastinate on the research.
Right. Okay, yeah, me too. I've unfortunately had that same problem. Okay. And if you could give advice to anybody who wants to study or pursue historical research, whether it's academically or further on and be almost into the professional field, take historical research into that field, what would you recommend they pick up in terms of habits? Like, what habits would you recommend them start to implement in their lives?
Honestly, I would say study weird stuff. You know, you might be looking at something and you think you have a solid idea of what it is, and there's like this some little like tiny detail. You're like, what is that? Go and explore that, because that's really how you get like this like big web of knowledge and how everything kind of interlinks together. Like, my last semester's paper was on dynastic inbreeding, which is like a crazy subject in itself. But just as I was going, I would find like other weird little diseases, other weird little things that people noted down in journals, and I would go and I would look for that, and that's really how I was able to find such like a solid web of information. It's just like exploring the weird stuff. I think you should explore weird topics in general, just because that makes it so much more interesting, but especially with like your core topic, find the weird stuff. Find the weird like stuff nobody's really looking at.
Yeah, and that'll give you an even bigger base level of knowledge. That makes a lot of sense. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And our next guest is
Kazacevicius.
Hey, okay, can you give me a reminder of what your paper topic is?
So my paper topic is really going over Japanese post-war and the kind of PR cover-up they did to kind of have a forgiveness of their war crimes and their war doings, I guess.
Okay, for sure. So when you were coming up with your topic and you started to look into sources, when did you realize that this topic that you're obviously interested in was something that you could further that research in and write a paper about? What did you find, or what was it that made you think like, okay, I can write this paper on this?
Well, there's definitely a lot of different sources and stuff that I am able to look at. There's a pretty good record of everything going on that I'm really focusing on. There's a lot of different like cultural media and stuff like that really zones in on what I'm talking about and is a good source for that. So really, I just started looking, and it really wasn't that hard to find exactly what I wanted to find. So
yeah, I can agree with that. Like more modern history topics tend to have a lot of sources that make it easier to write a paper, and especially when it comes to governments, PR, governments, policies, it could be it's pretty accessible to find what they put out and for people to see.
Even just that, like, past the propaganda, there were so many countries involved that it's like I can really find more unbiased opinions as well, because there's just so many different countries and people involved in it. So
right. And so when you are looking at these sources, has there been any, I could imagine there might be, but has there been any sources that you found that kind of go against the general argument of Japan did X, Y, or Z to make themselves look a certain way? Have you found sources that say the opposite and say, no, they didn't?
I think it's more of just not so much that, like, no, they didn't do this, like, completely erasing it. It's more of just the way they word it.
Okay.
Like, a lot of times they'll just be like, oh, like, Japan did this, but they really didn't mean to, like, or, like, they really feel bad about it, that sort of thing. So it's not so much that they completely erase it, but they definitely, like, minimize it and minimize the impact it has. And I found that in a lot of different sources. So.
Yeah. I could imagine maybe sources maybe even written in Japan or by people?
Yeah, a lot of the post-World War II propaganda that I'm looking at really, they like talk about like, oh, the war is like bad, but like we had to do it. We had to like uplift Japan in that way. So it's not so much like erasing that they did anything, but kind of being like, oh, we were just like a product of what was going on. So.
They reframed that
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, so when you originally at the beginning of the semester had a topic in mind, did you ever shift your thesis question or your general argument or ideas as you started to do research?
Definitely. I mean, there's both a lot of information and not that much information for me to go through. Mm-hmm. So I kind of, like, while researching, I found different things that I think are more interesting or that are more important to research. Mm-hmm. But I really started looking into, like, Kawaii and how they use that to kind of cover up different things that they had done. But I think I kind of have pivoted away from that a little bit, and now more just looking at the U.S. And what they did to kind of aid Japan in that, and then just the propaganda and different stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I'm not so much looking at the more like broader post-World War II. Like I was looking into the 90s and the 80s and stuff. Now I'm kind of focusing more in on like the 40s and 50s, like right after World War II.
Okay. So again, back to the beginning of the semester, mm-hmm. if you could tell yourself, or if you could have some type of knowledge that you have right now at the beginning of March, what is something you kind of wish you knew before the semester started for this class specifically?
I guess I would just try and, that's a good question. I don't know. I think because I had already done this paper, I had done this topic last semester in my Modern Asia class, mm-hmm. and I really just wanted to broaden on what I was asking and researching in that paper. So I think just from doing that paper, I was able to like kind of fill in the gaps of what I might have been missing or what I would have changed in my research process. So I think just from having had done it earlier, I don't think I would have changed anything that much this semester. But
that's good. Mm-hmm. Well, that's good because like I know for myself, like I would have maybe said like my topic has changed, mm-hmm. and I would have tried to narrow it down a little quicker. So it's good that you have a good background on mm-hmm. this topic. And what advice would you give to students who kind of have an idea that they want to pursue historical research mm-hmm. and academically go into history as a for their college career or even after college? Like what advice would you give in regards of habit building and habits that they should build?
Okay. I would just say really just start researching, start seeing if you like the research process, because mm-hmm. a lot of people just can't get with the research process. A lot of people find it kind of boring. Just test it out, see what you might be interested, different topics that you might be interested in. Just research them, look into them, see if it really interests you and if it's something that you could really see yourself doing for a long time. Because a lot of times people think, oh, like research is gonna be so quick, like it'll only take like a 20-minute YouTube video and then I'll know everything there is to know. But it takes a lot longer, and I think people just realizing that is really important if they do want to pursue history.
Right. All right. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And our next guest is
Makayla Fuentes.
Hey, Makayla. Okay, so remind me what a general idea of your topic that you're researching this semester.
So I don't really have like a thesis plan yet, but the general idea is homosexuality in Germany before and after the rise and fall of the Nazi Party.
Okay. Wow, that is insanely interesting. I've never ever thought about anything like that. That's really interesting. I'm excited to see your presentation. So obviously this is a very interesting topic. So at one point during the research, did you find something, or what point were you like, this is actually something I can write a paper about?
So, there's actually a lot of research about this, which was kind of surprising to me. And what I really wanted to do, I wanted to focus on women, mm-hmm. but I thought like that was not going to work out because I figured there wouldn't be a lot, but there actually kind of is. Wow. A lot of research done on like
queer women, which I think is cool, and I think I'd like to take it in that direction if I can, because I mean it's not as extensive as, you know, like what they have about men.
For sure.
But I think I'd like to go that way.
I'm actually surprised that they even have anything documented about queer women at all, especially
Right.
in this regime. So that's very interesting. Was it, just my personal question, are these sources coming from like people in Germany, or is it like outside countries, outsiders researching inward into Nazi Germany? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Like secondary sort, yeah. It's like most of it's like secondary stuff, but there
Wow.
are like some cases of. I did read about there was I think there was a transgender woman that I had read about. I don't really know a lot about it, but there's a lot of transgender people too, and a lot of transgender women that I've read about, which I think is interesting.
That is super. Like, do these tend to be more primary sources that you're finding about, like, personal testimonies and things like that, or is it people writing about
They
them?
don't really have like personal testimonies. There's like
Yeah.
lots of photos and stuff, which
Yeah.
I mean is kind of helpful, but
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know.
That's super interesting. So at the start of the semester to now, has your approach or I know you don't have a thesis like statement, but have your questions changed as you've started to research, if you've found less of one thing and more of another thing?
Yeah, definitely. I have a lot of questions, kind of, actually. Questions just keep coming up as I look at more stuff. Somebody else I wanted to talk about is there was a Nazi officer, and he was gay. I forget what his name was. But he actually wrote an autobiography before he ended up getting executed.
Wow.
But he wrote an autobiography, which I thought would be like really helpful, because he talks about he was like kind of allied with Hitler in the beginning, but then once it started coming out that he was gay, it started publicly coming out, then he like lost power, and he writes about it. So I thought that was like really interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
It's like the perfect primary
I
source.
was gonna say
yeah.
that sounds like something you can get even a thesis statement from. That's amazing. Okay, and so now going back to the beginning of the semester again, what is one thing you would tell yourself, like what is a piece of advice you'd give yourself about this class, about this paper, now at the beginning of March, that you wish you knew at the beginning of January?
So I'm like the biggest procrastinator ever.
Yeah.
And I like to wait to do my research, which is really a bad idea. I wish that I could tell myself just to start doing it, because it just makes like starting to write so much easier.
Yeah. Has the annotated bibliography helped that or no?
I do think it's helpful, just because it forces me to actually look into stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly how many of these sources that I put on here I will use, or if I'll exactly use them in the way that I said I'm going to, but it does make me start doing stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the annotated bibliography for me, which was due this week, which is week 8, this is our first, like, assignment that we've had to turn in for this class, and we have to look at all these sources and write a little quick summary about them, and that has been, like, the best way for me to start reading the sources that I'm finding more in depth. So that, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And then if you could give someone advice who is considering going into history or considering pursuing history professionally, what would you tell them in regards of habits that they should maybe have or start to build?
I think the most important thing is to not waste time with topics that you're not interested in. Because, I mean, you're going to write a bad paper if you are not interested in something.
Right.
And I know we can't always be interested in everything, but most of the time there are ways that you can write a paper and kind of tune it to what you're interested to, rather than just something you have to do.
Exactly. I agree with that. I've definitely done that in my college career, and it's helped a lot in my writing process and the grades I get. It's definitely due to the fact that I like what I'm writing about. So yeah.
Right, yeah.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And our next guest is
Kassidy Cotter.
Okay, Kassidy, can you remind me a brief idea of what your research topic is?
Yeah, so my research topic, I am really wanting to research Irish folklore that is rooted in Celtic religion, the old Celtic world.
Okay, so A personal question I have about that is, what time periods, like Celtic religions, that seems to predate Christianity and stuff like that.
Of course.
What time periods do you, like, if you could guess or generally tell me when was that taking place?
That is, I guess, my biggest question at the moment,
Oh.
and the thing that I'm having the hardest time researching. So, my research, the furthest back it goes to, I'm really diving deep into ancient history.
Wow.
So, I wanted to give myself the basis for, what we have today. And I'm figuring out that there's actually not much that we have on ancient Celtic religion. So I'm going back, I'm starting at 1200 BC, and then I'm going to the modern century. And I don't think I'm going to explore all of that in my paper.
Right.
But
maybe utilize it to get a general idea of when the things have started to shift.
Absolutely.
That's really, I would have had no idea that I would assume that they have stuff on that, so that's really interesting that they don't. I wonder,
So I could tell you a bit about that. So they have in Ireland is the last place where the Celtic people survived.
Okay.
Or survived today. But they were a really large group of people that kind of, I believe they would have lived within modern-day France, Germany, Belarus, and they migrated further north. But they, I'm learning a lot about magic and their ancient druidic religion, and they actually didn't write anything down purposefully.
Oh.
Yeah, all of it was oral tradition. They thought that their stuff was so spiritually powerful that they didn't want to put it. And there's evidence that in the later 3rd, 4th century, I may be a bit too early, but they were familiar with Roman and Greek and Latin writings. They intentionally did not write anything down, which is what makes it so hard.
That is, that's super interesting. I would have had no idea. So as I can imagine, it might be difficult to find both secondary and primary sources. So where have you found yours so far?
So the book that I have really been diving into is Celtic Myths and Legends by T.W. Rolleston. He uses a lot of references. I'm finding a big one is Julius Caesar.
Wow.
He writes his impressions of these people and what he believes, and he's almost in awe of them and how their society functions.
Wow, so your primary sources are the written testimonies of ancient leaders, Greek. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So have you run into any sources that maybe kind of go against what ideas are normally being portrayed? So have any of your sources kind of contradicted the normal ideas that you've noticed so far, the general ideas? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess that is the biggest thing when discussing Irish fairy tales and folklore, because what we have today, or what we know about their general mythology and their stories, is most likely not what it would have been originally, which is, I guess, what I kind of want to center my thesis around.
So okay, so there are a lot of sources that probably go against what is really true.
Well, I guess the thing is we'll never know. So I'm exploring a lot of researchers during the medieval era into the modern era and their different takes on what these fairy tales and folklore really mean, or what they would have been.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of because I can imagine if it's an oral history, if it's based in oral traditions, there is no certainty at all on any of this.
No.
Going on. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So if you could go back to the beginning of the semester and give yourself a piece of advice before starting this paper, what would you tell yourself?
Always get a head start on my research. I will. I find a lot of interesting things, but it's really hard because I'll hyperfixate on one thing and then there's a whole boatload of other things that I really should be getting into. So maybe better. I always tell myself I'm gonna better plan out my reading list.
I understand entirely.
Yeah.
And then if you could give anybody who is considering going into history at the higher education level or even professionally, what habits would you recommend that they start picking up?
So, I guess for me, I would recommend YouTube. There are so many historians and researchers who, put their research on the platform, and I feel like a lot of my general knowledge or basis for the information that I know today, I do get from YouTube, and I don't think it's an underrated source, but I love my fair share of documentaries. I follow a couple of people that I frequently just put on in the background.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think YouTube is a great place to start for, let's say you're wondering what's going on, what anything about a historical topic, watch a YouTube video. You might be like, okay, I get it. I could be done with this. Or you can say, I like this, I want to learn more, and then you can base paper topics off that. Or it's almost just like a nice source of entertainment. I agree.
It is, yeah.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And that's it for this week's episode. Stay tuned for further episodes.